a 10-lap race which follows a 6-minute qualifying session for the final candidates in the Asian element of the Nissan GT Academy. What was it, 8 days ago we had the international contingent with 10 drivers whittled down to 5, and then a 6-minute qualifying session, which is effectively practice because the qualifying session as it's billed today does not determine the grid positions for the 5 drivers. That was all done last night at Northampton International Raceway with these 5 drivers all in, it's fair to say, fairly aged Nissan Micras, and I think most of them ended up in a shape that the designer didn't really intend, with front corners, but just been shown some photographs actually of what remained of some of those Micras from last night. 5 started and only 2 finished, and that determines the grid for the 10-lap race a bit later on today. But we do have a qualifying session in order for the 5 drivers that remain in the competition to kind of get used to this Silverstone circuit. We're on a different configuration from that we were on last Wednesday. It was the national circuit last week. It's the international circuit, which is the top portion, the Buckinghamshire end of the Silverstone circuit. So starting from the wing and then heading through Farm and down towards the right-hander, which is hard braking into the loop effectively. Village corner first of all, and then what is the loop on the Grand Prix circuit, but they actually go straight on there via a portion of the circuit which is conveniently called the Link, and that brings them back on at Chapel. They head down the Hanger Straight, then on the traditional format of the circuit once more down to Stowe, through the Vale, and then the club corner itself becomes the final lap, or final corner on the lap, and they will do that 10 times later on today. But as I say, this 6-minute qualifying session will just get them used to that circuit, and also possibly used to a bit of inclement weather, because looking out of the windows here there is a lot of low-hanging cloud and it doesn't look too promising. We were blessed with really good weather conditions last week, but there may be a chance of a bit of rain for some of these drivers to further factor in some variables. I'll tell you who remains in just a moment. By the way, my name's Johnny Palmer, may be joined by Lawrence from the Nissan GT Academy a bit later on for some insight between qualifying and the race itself. So we started the day with 10 drivers, 2 from the Philippines, 2 from India, 2 from Thailand, 2 from Japan and 2 from Indonesia, and we have lost 5 of those drivers, and we therefore still have from the Philippines in car number 5, which is the yellow car, Jose Gerard Policarpio, and he will start in car number 5 from 3rd position. Actually, I'll do it in grid order, which is probably easier to follow. So Andika Rama is the man that's got through for Indonesia. He starts in the number 1 car, which is green, and it will start from pole position. It will also start first car in this 6-minute session as well, so he will get effectively a clear track ahead of him to put in a good time. And this will further go towards the judgment of these 5 drivers across the whole week, really. And it's not necessarily, as I was hearing earlier on in the briefing, the driver's briefing, it's not necessarily the guy that wins this race that will win the whole competition for the Asian element. Second on the grid will start Takuya Takahashi, which is the red car, number 7, and it will start effectively alongside the number 1 car, but just about a car length behind, effectively on a staggered 2x2 grid, or 1x1 grid, staggered 1x1 grid. The next car will be the yellow number 5, as I've told you, Jose Gerard Policarpio. Next up we'll have Akshay Gupta, the Indian representative, in car number 6, which is orange. That car went pretty well in the second practice session, which was held earlier on today. There were a couple of practice sessions, each with instructors alongside the drivers, in order for them to learn the track, and they'll be on their own from this point on. And the final car on the grid, a man that has shown much promise up until this point, but the car was badly damaged in the Nissan Micra race last night, so didn't get to the maximum of 10 laps, and therefore I don't think his promise was truly shown. But Natheos Sirigeya could well show some promise from the back of the field. So the cars are starting to work their way now from the grid to pit lane through the door that is halfway down the grid, I believe. Some of them have disappeared. No, they're just doing a U-turn actually and heading back down very close to our commentary position here on the inside of club corner, and then they'll go down the pit lane in order to then come back onto the grid ahead of qualifying. They will be released, these cars, at 10-second intervals, so not like a traditional qualifying session, in that you have, hopefully should have nobody in front of you, nobody behind you, unless you make a mistake, of course, or unless you throw the car off into the gravel, and then you may well rejoin. right alongside somebody, but there is opportunity to have this Silverstone International Circuit totally to yourself, with a gap ahead and behind, and a chance really to put in a good lap, but also in order to just learn the surroundings. Again, the driver's briefing reminded me that you have to do at least 3 laps in this qualifying session in order to take the race start. If you haven't completed 3 laps, they don't have to necessarily be quick ones, but if you haven't done those 3 laps, then you won't be able to take part in this race. So Indonesian representative, Japanese, Philippines, Akshay Gupta from India, and the Thailand representative as well. Of course, the Nissan GT Academy now well documented and has a great reputation for bringing race drivers who are very, very quick and have competed in some world-class events. And I think there was a time when this competition was almost smirked at, in that, well, you can't get somebody who's at home on their sofa playing the PlayStation and being particularly quick on Gran Turismo or other similar games. That talent on the sofa with a control pad in your hand must not surely translate into being a quick race driver in the real thing. Well, the Nissan GT Academy has gone very much against that and proven that we can get quick drivers, including people like Lucas Ordonez, who has taken part in Le Mans, 3 or 4 times now. Jan Mardenborough, still very much part of the GT3 entry, the GP3 entry, I should say, following the Grand Prix around. So he has got some good results in GP3, and is also a recognised GT3 GT driver. Gaetan Palatu taking part in his first Le Mans in 2015, and has driven a lot of different Nissan machinery, including going well at the Bathurst 12 Hours held every February. So there are names to be reckoned with who would not be in motorsport were it not for this competition. And are we quite possibly looking at the next star of upcoming motorsport? By the way, it was the Australian Matthew Simmons who got through last week. He didn't win the race, and that's a good example of exactly the fact that even if you do come out on top after 10 laps, you're not necessarily going to win the whole competition. Interesting point again made by Martin Smith and Bernard Cottrell from the BRSCC in the driver's briefing, though, that you can lose Nissan GT Academy in this race, because if you make contact with another car, then that more or less rules you out on the spot. If it's judged to be your fault and you club a fellow competitor, maybe take the other guy into the gravel with you, then that's you out on the spot. So these drivers will need to be aware of that. It's a difficult first corner, both on last week's track at Copse, which is renowned by Formula 1 drivers as one of the best corners in the world. Well, we're not on that configuration this time, but we are on a configuration that leads to a very, very quick first corner through Farm. And it's all about whether you brake through there just to ease very slightly, just a slight dab at the brakes maybe to settle the car, but it's not an easy corner to get your head around. And that's immediately followed by a left-hander, which is very fast as well. Then into hard braking at Village. But instead of immediately turning left after Village through the loop, as I say, they go straight on via the link and then rejoin the Grand Prix circuit at Chapel, which is then a big run down, a fast run down the Hanger Straight underneath the bridge and down towards Stowe, which again is a pretty quick corner. Lots of different routes can work through that Stowe corner, though, and it's a great overtaking opportunity. And these drivers will need to master exactly how to get round this circuit very, very quickly. Yes, they've had much of the morning instructed around here, but it's a very different thing to get in the car on your own, look around you and realise I'm the only one in here and I'm going to now operate this thing that is going to go very, very quickly indeed. Let me give you a bit of background on the cars that are being used. 5 identical Nissan 370Zs that push out about 330 brake horsepower, very slightly uprated via the ECU, so it gives a bit more than that, but it's basically a production spec car. Group N, if you're following if motorsport goes back a number of years. That term used a lot in rallying, of course, doesn't exist anymore, but Group N, the relationships between this car and the showroom model, pretty strong. It's a standard gearbox, so not a sequential box, H-pattern gearbox, which again these drivers will need to become used to. And they carry the NISMO limited slip diff. There is an MSA approved roll cage, of course, to stiffen the car up, and that will make it behave a lot differently from the road going counterpart. But of course safety is paramount in one of these machines. Öhlins dampers, they run an uprated fuel delivery system, and also there's a competition clutch in there which will give them a good start. One or two questions in the briefing earlier on asking about whether the drivers could do practice starts perhaps on the green flag lap, and that was permitted, mainly though from the line when the green flag is waved, in order to make sure that the biting point, they've got used to that, because it can be all down to the start, of course. If you get a good start and rush into the lead. I remember last week Matthew Simmons got away well from pole position, faded then in the middle of the race, but performed well enough to win the international part of the competition. There are carbon international pieces inside the car, things like door panels, so lightweight wherever possible. And this and the weight of the car is 1,450 kilos, so 1,450 kilos. There's also GT4, as they call it, version NISMO body kit on the car, so it looks very stylish and actually looks pretty similar to a GT4 car, but underneath the skin it isn't quite as powerful as a GT4 version of the 370Z. They're running on Toyo tyres. It's a cut slick, which will offer quite a bit of grip. It will be interesting though if we get a bit of moisture from the air as to how much grip that will offer, but nevertheless we hope to get these 10 laps and the 6 minutes of qualifying done before we get any sign of rain, possibly slightly clearing actually, out towards the club end of the circuit. So I'm in the race control part of the new wing, ground floor. It took me a little while to find it actually. This place is hidden away just beneath the Grand Prix podium, and got a great view of the bank of screens as the lap starts, heading through farm, and then hopefully some overtaking without contact at Village, and then down at Stowe as well. I'm expecting that to be a good overtaking opportunity. Also at Club as well, where the cars will maybe get side by side. Last week, a great performance from the Turkish driver who came through pretty strongly, and also the Mexican guy Juan, who really kept himself out of trouble, started at the back in 5th position and came through to finish 2nd in the end. So that will have won him a lot of points in the eyes of the Nissan GT Academy judges. So this is Nismo TV. Thank you for joining myself, Johnny Palmer, looking at the entry for this second day of racing. And it is properly racing, as I say. Bernard Cottrell here from the BRSCC. There is definitely a clerk of the course and other bodies in race control as well, overseeing this as if it were a standard MSA meeting. Couple of minutes to go before the cars are released then from pit lane, as I say, at 10-second intervals, and then we will see exactly what these drivers have up their sleeves. I'll remind you that the qualifying session will not dictate the order that the cars start on the grid, because that was all decided last night just down the road at Northampton International Raceway. A bruising affair, it is fair to say. 6 minutes have appeared on the clock though, and this is where we think about what the drivers, where their minds are, because they need to put out of their heads, I suppose, what's happened this morning. They're lucky to get through to this portion of the day, and of course have had to say goodbye to their compatriots, because there were at the start of the day 2 Japanese drivers, 2 Indonesian drivers, 2 from the Philippines, India and Thailand, and there will have been a little bit of inter-competition, I suppose, within each of those places, but also friendships that have started through the last few days. They need to put that out of the mind there now and figure that they are through to the final, effectively, and it will be judged not only on these next 2 sessions, or session and race, but also from the other things that have happened this week. And Dika Rama kept himself out of trouble last night, as did Takuya Takahashi actually. One or two people I've spoken to this morning said that Takahashi hasn't necessarily got the pace, but he's got the ability to read a race and therefore finish fairly high up, and he will win accolades for that as well. So we have about 10 seconds to go before this session is due to start at 2:45 local time. It's very quick, a 6-minute session, and then the turnaround between qualifying and the race is also pretty rapid, so not a lot of time to gather your thoughts for these 5 drivers. And Dika Rama will get a lap before he gets going, by the way, of course, because it's basically an out lap followed by then quick times coming through, and we'll keep you updated with a big timing screen right in front of me, and you can see that as well on our feed on Nismo TV, in order to keep on top of where people are, and really this will give us a good idea of who's likely to be quick in the race. also in the shot to my, which way am I pointing? Yes, that way on the screen. There we go, to my left. In the middle screen, that's a view of the start-finish line. And I think that will stay locked off, actually, at Abbey, depending on whether the guys need to switch to other positions around the circuit. But there is a great bank of screens below, really concentrated on the top 2 rows of those screens, because the rows 3 and 4 are basically a repeat of the top 2. And they will shoot along the top row first of all from left to right, and then back along the second row right to left as they negotiate corners at Stowe and Vale and then Club, and back over the start-finish line. So moments away from this qualifying session, and of course there will be a lot of advice given from various driver coaches here. Spoke to Rob Barth earlier on today, Harry Tinknell, who's very much part of the Nissan element of going World Endurance Championship racing, featured at Le Mans of course. So there are a lot of people here to bend ears with and get advice from, you know, the cheeky line possibly through Village to get you through there quicker than anybody else, but they are also assessing you as well, so it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Yes, you can get some useful tips from them, but you almost think maybe too many questions might go against you. But certainly the tutoring here is first class, as is really the whole of the week for these drivers, with accommodation supplied locally, and they really are looked after, including the guys of course that are now out of the competition as well. There'll be an interesting conversation no doubt tonight over dinner as to how the week has gone. So now that screen in the middle of the shot, yes, that's just been tipped to the right there, so that's a camera looking straight down the barrel of the start and finish line. There's the wing to the left hand side, and turn 1 is the corner that we're looking at, which is Farm, a very quick right-hander through the sweeping left, which leads down to the complex section. And it is certainly complex in that it will be difficult to master for some of these drivers. I remember John Hindhoff, who was joining me last week, a fellow Radio Le Mans commentator of course, joining me last week on Nismo TV, said that it's often an interesting start to these races, because if someone goes for a do-or-die manoeuvre, typical of me I have to be honest, on the PlayStation, I normally overtake absolutely everybody before the first corner, but then forget to brake, and you end up in the gravel and lose the race and can barely rejoin, with body panels dropping off the car left, right and centre. You kind of hope that someone's not going to do that. I remember the American guy Ryan from last week making a superb manoeuvre up the inside of everybody where I was at Beckett's, but then didn't quite get the turning point right and went sailing off onto the grass. So all the hard work up the inside was undone as he exited the corner. So the drivers will need to be careful and also be wary, of course, that it is a 10-lap race. And although that doesn't sound a lot of time, it's certainly not an endurance race. It's certainly quicker than a touring car race as well. But you can't win the race at that first corner, or indeed on the first lap. And sometimes, if the move isn't on, as described in the briefing earlier on, it's better to just bide your time, sit behind an opponent and make sure that you wait for a really good opportunity rather than a kind of half-baked one, because that can often bite you and you'll come off second best. So yeah, last week it was Ryan Lynch who went straight on. In fact, he went straight on later on in the race as well and tried the Grand Prix circuit, it's fair to say. He went up the escape road and couldn't get the car back into the race in a hurry. So Ryan Lynch ended up finishing in 5th position. Ali Sami started the race well, the Egyptian, but faded at sort of half distance. But it was Juan Carlos Carmona Chavez who had the best run for me from 5th position, kept himself out of trouble, but also pulled off some good overtakes to finish in 2nd position. And Chavez, I reckon, was probably who finished just behind Chavez in the end, in the yellow car, the man from Australia. And Matthew Simmons could be one to watch in future years. Hussein Dagli won the race, the Turkish entered car. So will the luck on that basis be with the driver who is on board the orange machine, I wonder, Akshay Gupta? Because orange, well, certainly a colour that is favourable to myself, being a Blackpool FC fan, but I'm not sure whether orange will be a winner this week. Akshay Gupta driving the number 6 orange car it is Jose Gerard Policarpio who beat Rafael Miru Lasaguis from the Philippines. So he will be in car number 5, starting from 3rd on the grid. Natheos Sirigaya in car number 2. That's the blue flashes on the Nissan 370Z for Thailand, and he will start from 5th on the grid. But the front 2, it'll be Andika Rama from pole position for the race, but also for qualifying. He's the Indonesian driver and will be in the principally white car, but with the green flashes. And the second car to be released from pit lane will be Takuya Takahashi in car number 7. They've all had helmets fitted, by the way. Make sure that, as I say, safety is paramount once more, and the hands device as well. That took a little bit of time to make sure that all the helmets fitted suitably. And also the full briefing, which probably took 10 or 15 minutes, with some translation necessary actually for at least one driver. So English doesn't necessarily need to be your first language in order to succeed in motorsport, but it's useful, I can imagine, certainly. And yeah, as I say, one of the drivers of the 5 needed translating a lot of the information, which is not the best, it has to say, because I have to say, because there are specific words, I suppose, in motorsport. There are specific turns of phrases that maybe don't translate particularly well. So it will be interesting to see how much of that information has been taken on board. There is a bit of a theory that when the green flag is waved for the warming up lap, some of the drivers may think that's the start of the race. So that could be interesting as well, the fastest green flag lap that we will see here at Silverstone. So Matthew Simmons is certainly somebody to look out for, as I say, and I wonder how much attention has been paid to last Wednesday by these drivers: Andika Rama, Takuya Takahashi, Jose Gerard Policarpio, Akshay Gupta and Natheos Sirigaya. It's probably best really just to put the blinkers on and concentrate on your own week. Anyway, we have a green flag now, so the cars have been released. Some of them have. Still the blue car to come out onto the track, so we are underway. This 6-minute session has started to tick down. In fact, we're already a minute into it, and the Indonesian car, which is driven by Andika Rama, heads over the line to commence a fast lap. So he will be the first one round, obviously. Clear track in front of Andika to put in a good time. Through goes Takuya Takahashi as well, the Japanese driver, along with Jose Gerard Policarpio. So this is where we will start to see good times potentially coming through. I can give you ideas of who is quick through sectors 1 and 2, although not got specific times. But already breaking the beam at sector 2, in fact, sector 1 not being used on our screen, so there is only one sector as such, plus a speed trap. And so far, Andika Rama is quickest through the first sector, but that is beaten now by Jose Gerard Policarpio in the yellow number 5 car. Quickest through the speed trap, interestingly, is the Indian driver Akshay Gupta in the orange number 6. So waiting now for Indonesia, Andika Rama, to come round to complete the first lap. He is, I think, coming down towards club corner now. So hard braking. This is the sharp left-hander, or 90-degree left-hander, followed by an ever-opening final right-hander, which is club, to take them over the line. And still waiting for the time to appear. It is 48 seconds, and that's immediately beaten, in fact, by Japan now. So, although interestingly, that time has not popped up on the screen where I expected it to. So I'll hesitate very slightly. 48 seconds is the time we have, at least at sector 1. So I reckon that probably is the time, although the car's not being shown as completed in a lap yet. Ah, there we go. It's over the line now. So Indonesia has completed one lap. It was a 120.536 for Andika Rama. And can that be bettered by Takuya Takahashi? The answer is yes. So Japan go quickest with a 120.116. And even better than that goes Jose Gerard Policarpio. So it's actually the further down in the order you are tending to be the quicker cars. So Philippines topping now India, who goes into second position. Akshay Gupta with a good time, a 1:19.667. So it is Policarpio who is quickest in the yellow number 5 car. Second fastest Akshay Gupta in the orange number 6 car, the Indian driver, 1:19.667. Japan fourth fastest, a 1:20.116, and then Indonesia are fifth fastest. In fact, fifth fastest now, because who's slotted into second position? It's Thailand. Thailand with Natheos Sirigaya at the wheel has just done a 1:19.563, which makes that car second fastest. The time is going down quite considerably, actually. Only 2 minutes to go, bearing in mind that these cars have to complete 3 laps. It's going to be a tight run thing with 2 minutes to go, but certainly possible. Waiting for the second lap for Indonesia. That's just happened now, and Andika Rama is able to improve, but actually not improve his position. So it's a 1:20.159. There is improvement, though, for the Philippines driver, which is Jose Gerard Policarpio, doing a 1:18.366 to go quickest now. And that puts Japan down to second place. What about India? India going quicker as well, a 1:18.971. So there's been improvement for Philippines and India. Japan knocked down to third position, having done a better lap, but it isn't quicker than Policarpio or than Gupta. So Takahashi from Japan is third fastest. It's Sirigaya from Thailand in fourth position. And then in fifth place in the number 1 car, Andika Rama, who's first out, of course, but is currently at the back of the pack in terms of qualifying. This does not affect Andika's grid position, though, for the race in a short while. This 10-lap race, which will see Andika Rama on pole position, regardless of what happens in this session. 35 seconds to go, that's all. And it is Jose Gerard Policarpio at the head of the order from Akshay Gupta, I beg your pardon, from India. And then in third position, Takuya Takahashi. So I reckon the Thailand driver may have fallen off somewhere, because the guy from Thailand, Natheos Sirigaya, has not completed his second lap. So Sirigaya with an issue somewhere, I would think. 4 seconds to go, so these cars need to be on their third lap, which most of them are by now, but Sirigaya, there is a problem for. Waiting for the drivers, though, to work their way through this final sequence of corners. I've just seen Sirigaya still out on track, actually, so maybe he's just had an issue and then been able to restart the car. But what can Jose Gerard Policarpio do on this lap in car number 5, coming round to complete lap 3? There is the number 2 car, so Sirigaya is certainly still running. A very, very slow lap, though, at 2 minutes 38.8. So what on earth happened to Natheos Sirigaya, who was the 5th car to be released into the session? So Jose Gerard Policarpio will be the first car across the line. No, it won't. It'll be Andika Rama, I beg your pardon, who will come over the line to complete 3 laps in a moment or two. Over the line, first of all, goes Andika Rama. Does a 2:41, which is massively slow. So this is presumably down to a bit of rain about, because these are very, very slow times indeed. And they're all over 2 minutes, with Indian driver Akshay Gupta the last one to come through. And Akshay Gupta crosses the line now, I think. Just saw the orange flash of Akshay to my left. And Akshay Gupta from India does indeed complete a lap. Again, a 2:37.155. So intriguing session that. It's now completed, by the way, so we are done. Those 6 minutes rattled on through very, very quickly on Nismo TV. And the quickest car in the end was Jose Gerard Policarpio, set on the second lap, a 1:18.366, which is 0.6 of a second quicker than Indian driver Akshay Gupta. So 0.6 of a second the margin. Does that pose something that we should read into, I wonder, for the 10-lap race later on. Remember, this does not decide the grid. It just gives us an indication of perhaps how fast these cars can go. But Policarpio quickest, a 1:18.366 from Akshay Gupta for India in the orange number 6 car, at 0.6 of a second adrift. Third position in that session was Takuya Takahashi from Japan, having done a 1:19.095, but not on the last lap. Again, his last effort was over 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. Thailand and Natheos Sirigaya going very quickly compared to everybody else, doing a 1:19.811. Did he come in, perhaps, to the pit lane to get a tyre change, I wonder? Because the blue car was a lot faster than everybody else on that final lap. It wasn't any better to improve his position over 4th place. So his first lap was his best, a 1:19.563, but he did do a 19.8 compared to everybody else's, which was 2.5 minutes long. And then Indonesia were 5th fastest in the green number 1 car, and Andika Rama 5th quickest. Well, what do we read into that then, guys and girls? I wonder, back at home or wherever you're listening and viewing us on Nismo TV for this 6-minute qualifying session, stroke practice session. Certainly, Jose Gerard Policarpio is one to watch in the race, as is Akshay Gupta, who really pulled it out of the bag during that session. 0.6 of a second, though, is the gap between Philippines and India, first and second in qualifying. Where do they start on the grid? 3rd and 4th, respectively, behind Andika Rama, who will start from 5th, and also behind Takuya Takahashi, who will start from 3rd position. So there are people really that will start further down on the grid who are capable of more or better than that position, you could argue. They're in slightly false positions, and that's the beauty of, you know, developing a grid, I suppose, from last night and Northampton International Raceway, which is very different from the international circuit here at Silverstone. Quickest through the speed traps, by the way, was the poleman, or not the poleman, but the guy quickest in qualifying, having done a 119.8 mile per hour speed trap. And that was 1.5 miles an hour quicker than the Indian driver, and also pretty much quicker than the Japanese, Thailand and Indonesian entered drivers. So Philippines seems to have the edge through the fast stuff. The quickest first sector, by the way, was set by Japan and Takuya Takahashi. So I'm seeing purple times in places away from the fastest cars here, which again promises much. I think there's an element of inconsistency from this session we've just watched, and also the grid, how it will line up a bit later on today. And therefore a very difficult race to read, you could argue. Who's your money on then, I wonder, with Jose Gerard Policarpio certainly throwing down the gauntlet to everybody else, saying, I am very quick around this circuit and you'll be chasing me. 0.6 of a second per lap is a lot once you've done 10 laps. So will he have that sort of dominance? The thing is, he'll have to work his way past a couple of other cars, Takuya Takahashi and Andika Rama in 2nd and 1st position. And another interesting point, I keep coming back to this driver's briefing that happened probably about 45 minutes to an hour ago. But a lot of good points put to the drivers in the briefing, including just be careful through the first corner, because there is only one racing line through Farm. It's not as if you could go through there 2 abreast, as you can arguably in other circuits. It's very fast speed. There is only one racing line, as I say, and if you're slightly off that racing line, you will end up in the gravel. There is a very wide gravel trap in order for you to kind of collect you, but it will take a good while to actually work your way back onto track, and a 10-lap race is all but gone if you do have a big moment like that. There's conveniently a puddle right outside our window here, and I'm trying to work out whether there's any raindrops in that puddle. I don't think there is. There's a bit of wind around. Oh, thanks Robin. Yeah, just twisting the camera around. I can't see any ripples in that puddle, but I can see it just moving gently in the wind. So that will be blowing the darker clouds through. It looks lighter behind it, but it's just very interesting that there was that 2.5 minute lap for most people, although the Thailand driver was much slower on the middle lap and then far better on the final lap to complete the 3 that were necessary. And of course all 5 drivers needed to do 3 laps in order to be considered for the race. They're all safely in, which is the good news. But why on earth did Jose Gerard Policarpio do this 2 minutes 37 second lap, which is way slower? Okay, so we got some questions via Nismo TV. Thank you for those. First of all, let me go in reverse order. Oh, some of them are being answered, by the way. What circuit are we on? What layout, national or international? Well, we are on the international, despite Dutch racers' answer. It's the international circuit this week, so starting from the wing, as I say, and then heading down towards the complex, which is Village and the Loop, but they don't turn left at the Loop, they go straight on through the Link, and then back onto the Hangar Straight via Chapel, which is a much tighter right-hander as opposed to a left-hander on the Grand Prix circuit, Chapel Corner. One or two technical issues as well, unless that's a reference to my height. And I trust you've focused this camera perfectly so that, you know, even though I am only 5'9", I look a good 6 foot. So this race is just around the corner now, and again, along with the revs a little bit later on, blood pressure will start to rise, I think, as anticipation builds. It will be a clutch start, a standing start for these drivers, and some of them may well have practiced that on the start of the green flag lap. Some of them might just leave that to the gods and just hope that they get a good getaway. Also, these drivers need to remember simple things that us race fans, it's kind of second nature to us, in the sense that, you know, you don't get a green light, you get a red light, you get probably 5 red lights, and then they all go out, and that's the start of the race. But if you're not used to that, you're not playing a computer game which adopts that way of starting a race, that could be a little bit confusing. And also, we're just wondering how many of these 5 drivers actually start racing when they see the green flag, which indicates just a warm-up lap, of course, rather than those red lights going out. Is it raining or going to rain? Well, Mark Voltaire Elman, that is the big question, I have to say, because it's threatening here at Silverstone. It's not raining right now. I'm still happy to say it's not raining right now, just looking at that puddle, because I can't see any ripples or rain droplets within it. But it is windy here, which might affect the cars down the Hangar Straight. They're not hugely aerodynamically tuned, so although you can get a draft, of course, from a fellow competitor, and that will suck you along the Hangar Straight and also the start-finish line, you could say. But yeah, no rain yet, but we are expecting possibly a passing shower. What else have we got? Can we zoom in to one of the displays in the middle at the top? Can we do that? We can't do that, can we, Rabin? You're not missing a great deal, to be honest. The one at the top is, well, now focused on pit lane, and you can just see the bottom portion of the wing, and also a very nice grassy area, which you don't get when we're on the national circuit. I'll tell you, the floral gardens at this end of the circuit far outweigh the national pits, as they're called. And that earlier on was flooded with the driver coaches, just making sure that their protégés were performing well as they came out of Club Corner and past the lighting gantry. All 5 cars now are positioned back in pit lane, and you can see that from the middle picture. We have a timing screen immediately to the, as you look at the screen, immediately to the right of my head. That's the timing screen, which is pretty small, but there is then a copy of that at the bottom of our feed, which is far easier to read. The middle picture, as I say, focused on the pit lane, but that can change, and the screen to that is entirely blank. But you can monitor the rest of the cars then as they work their way around the lap via the other screens. As I say, top row they move from left to right. The first bit of that row just very slightly obscured by the picture of me. Apologies for that. And then they come back again on the second row from right to left. And the second row is Stowe Corner, by the way. It starts at Stowe and it works its way down through the Vale and into Club Corner to then eventually finish the lap. So these are well-rehearsed preparations that are taking place between qualifying and the race. Unlike this, of course, at a usual MSA race meeting, whereby you get a lot of time between your qualifying and your race sessions in order to prepare the car. These cars, by the way, are being fueled to the brim, I understand. Or if they're not being fueled right now, they will have been fueled ahead of the qualifying session to make sure that they are the same weight where possible. So they're all carrying a full fuel load, obviously way more fuel than is required for a 10-lap race, but that's the fairer way to do it. Nismo, give me a shout. Well, we need to shout out Bruce Invincible 911. Hello to you. Thank you for joining us on Nismo TV. Go Indonesia, says Irvian Nur Anagra, presumably listening and watching in Indonesia. Well, some work to do as far as the times in the qualifying were concerned, but the Indonesian car will start from pole, Andika Rama, so best position there. It just depends whether Andika's got the pace through 10 laps, which is an interesting question. So 3:15 is the advertised start time for the race, and we are less than 4 minutes away from that. So all of a sudden some movement in the pit lane as the cars, all 5 of them, work their way down this Grand Prix spec pit lane. The pit lane, by the way, is flat, spirit level flat, but the track actually inclines very slightly to the extent where there's a whole load of steps you've got to work your way up to get level with the track at the end of the pit lane. So, and that's in line with brand new Grand Prix circuits, whereby the pit lane has to be flat level and not in relationship to the scenery nearby. Where's John Hindhoff is a great question, because at moments like this between qualifying and the race, I'd just love to hand to John and get an interesting comment from him. He's in America covering something else Radio Le Mans related, because IMSA Radio this week is in Virginia at VIR, the Virginia International Raceway, for the latest Tudor United Sports Car Championship. So he will have been on Midweek Motorsport last night, live from the track, and he will be there on IMSARadio.com all weekend, covering, well, all the sessions for the Tudor United Sports Car Championship. I think a lot of the various different championships are there this weekend, including the Continental Tires Sports Car Challenge as well, which provides great racing. But we are concentrated on Nismo TV, and myself, Johnny Palmer, looking forward very much to this 10-lap race to see which way it's going to go in the favour of Indonesia, Japan, the Philippines, India or Thailand. There is a party on the grid now, ready to welcome these cars that have been released from the pit lane, and they work their way around this relatively short international circuit, appear at the last minute through Club Corner, and then will park up on the grid. There were questions put to the drivers as to how they were going to remember where to stop on the grid, not particularly right now on the dummy grid as it's called, but at the end of the green flag lap, because you can kind of know where you need to start, but there are lots of lines out there, lots of different grid hatchings, some that are relevant to this race and some that are very much not relevant to this race, and you could end up very easily parking in the wrong place. So I think there are bits of tape now that have been put on the pit wall as a reference to make sure that the drivers are alongside those bits of tape and therefore starting in exactly the right positions. But it's also a question of just monitoring exactly what's around you and remembering that for a lap's time when they come round and park up, because there will be penalties dished out for an incorrect starting position. They also need to be careful not to do a jump start, of course, as well. Yeah, the tyres I mentioned a little while ago, but that was at the start of our broadcast. So let me give you actually a rundown of the whole spec of the car as we think about going for a race start. We're about a minute away. I don't think we're running exactly to time, so it will be a short time after that before the cars are released. But all the driver coaches are there down there with 5 grid girls as well. And just the final few conversations being had now ahead of this important race. I was going to say all-important race. It's not all-important because, as I say, the result does not determine, is the word I'm chasing for, the winner from the Asian element of the Nissan GT Academy 2015. It's one thing that goes into a vast melting pot of decision-making, together with last night at Northampton, the rest of the day here today, and indeed the rest of the week, in fact. And all of that will go into the deliberation process to work out a winner from Asia. So they're running on Toyo tyres. It's a cut slick. So one or two people have said on the forum, semi-slick. That, you're pretty much right with that. A cut slick Toyo tyre. and it's basically a Group N spec car. So it runs with a standard H-pattern gearbox. They have a NISMO spec limited slip diff. There's an MSA approved roll cage in there, of course. Öhlins dampers, uprated fuel delivery system on these 370Zs. There's a competition uprated clutch fitted, together with quite a few carbon interior pieces like the door panels to make everything as lightweight as possible. The car, therefore, carrying those carbon bits and bobs, weighs 1450 kilos, 1450 kilos, and it has a GT4 version NISMO body kit as well. So they look like GT4 cars, but they are pretty much Group N spec, because they are distant cousins, you could say, from the road-going counterpart, the showroom version. Grid all of a sudden got very, very busy indeed, with a couple of camera crews working their way onto the grid to check up on some of the drivers. But these are all final preparations ahead of a 10-lap race. And by the way, the cars push out there or thereabouts 330 brake horsepower. That's the advertised brake horsepower for the road-going version. But one or two upgrades mean that there's a slight increase actually on the horsepower. But it's certainly not a slow piece of machinery, this. 5 identical cars, all fully fueled, ahead of 10 laps of racing around the international circuit at Silverstone here in Northamptonshire. Well, I stand in Buckinghamshire, central England, let's say. So nearly 17 minutes past 3 now local time. And the qualifying session, to give us an indication of how fast or slow some of these drivers will go, there was a definite yin and yang to it, in that we saw some really good times on the first lap, and then one of the drivers, Natheos Sirigea, had a very slow middle lap, which made me think, did that car come into the pits to have slightly different tyres fitted? But I don't think you can do that. But it certainly had a moment somewhere which slowed it down, and it did a lap time of over 2.5 minutes. The only reason why I think it had a tyre change, or might have had a tyre change at some stage, is that then the other cars that went pretty quick on laps 1 and 2 had a very slow third lap. Sirigea went quick on the first lap, really slow in the middle lap, and then was very quick on the final lap. So a very interesting session, and I'll admit you can't see every bit of the Silverstone circuit from here, so some of it remains a bit of a mystery. And that's the reason why we're trying to read our best into this NISMO TV broadcast. Of course, you may spot stuff that I am missing, so that's why the forum is there again, to chip in with your thoughts, and we will broadcast those and react to them as well accordingly. Plenty of support, though, I notice on the forum for Indonesia, loving the fact that they are on pole position. Can't wait to see them fight, says Nandika Hadi. Good to have you with us. Go Team Thailand. So some support for Natheos Sirigea, who, as I say, had that strange qualifying session with a fast lap, a slow lap, and then a fast lap to finish. And Sirigea has some support as well from Thailand. So 10 laps it is. 1 or 2 questions still being asked about how long we have to go. Well, it could start any time now, because the last few cameras are still on the grid. Grid girls still positioned next to their respective cars as well. But I noticed that the bodies on the grid are getting less and less now, so we will be about to get started. And this is where the concentration needs to kick in, really. You need to not worry about things that have happened already today, and also not worry about your pace in qualifying a bit earlier on today, because that's all in the past now. It does have a little bit of an impact on the race in terms of bragging rights from Jose Gerard Policarpio, but there he is, sat in 3rd position with some work to do. The yellow car that you can see from the middle picture to my right on the feed. It's a little bit fuzzy, I notice, and grainy, but we will tell you exactly what happens, because there are now only 4 people on the grid. And last few photographs being taken, I notice, of Andika Rama, who starts from pole position, Takuya Takahashi in 2nd place, Jose Gerard Policarpio 3rd, 4th place for Akshay Gupta, and 5th position on the grid for Natheos Sirigea And what have Jose Gerard Policarpio and Akshay Gupta got up their sleeves? Because clearly they like this Silverstone International Circuit slightly better than the other three, you could argue, because they were particularly quick in the pseudo qualifying session a few moments ago. Still, the skies look a little bit threatening. Are we going to have dry for the first half of the race and then a bit of drizzle to end it, which will make it very interesting indeed? I hope we get some finishers, because if the rain does really start to pour down, that could account for quite a number of these drivers. And I just think back to last night at Northampton International Raceway, where we started with 5 and ended with only 2. We really hope that all 5 cars get across the line, no matter in what position, but they'll all be wanting a race finish at the end of 10 laps. The green flag lap then is underway, and all 5 cars work their way down towards Farm, which is this quick right-hander, difficult to master, particularly at racing speed. Of course, they will be approaching it a bit slower than that, straight from the grid, but these cars accelerate very quickly. And the advice from Bernard Cottrell, who did the driver's briefing earlier on today, was that you need to be in single file, really, through Farm Corner. There is only one racing line through that portion of the circuit. Heading into Village Corner now and through the link, so not the loop, but they go straight on. As soon as they turn right at Village, it's not dead straight, but it is a shortcut, which brings them then through Chapel Corner, which is quite a tight right-hander, feeding them back onto the Hangar Straight. There's quite a bit of weaving going on from the poleman, Andika Rama, I notice. Again, suggestion from 1 or 2 people this morning is that even though you're going to weave from left to right, not quite from white line to white line, but fairly violently, that doesn't really generate a huge amount of tyre temperature, particularly with one of these cut slicks. But the cut slick might be very necessary if we get a bit of moisture in the air to make the track surface pretty greasy. Down at Stowe Corner, working their way through then on this warming up lap, the green flag lap, and again thoughts going through their minds as to how they're going to attack this first corner, this first lap, and will they be racing somebody from the off? Will there be some catching up necessary for the guys at the back? And for Nathias Sirigaya and Akshay Gupta, how quick do you turn it on? Do you just bide your time through the first lap and then see where you are afterwards, wait for other people to fall off, or do you attack from the off? These are just some of the questions that we're going through the minds now of Rama, Takahashi, Policarpio, Gupta and Sirigaya. They're coming through now to my left. So the yellow flag is being waved at the back of the order, just to say to the drivers, slow down. You need to be hitting your marks perfectly now. The 5 car of Jose Gerard Policarpio from the Philippines doing a bit of a practice start there towards the line, being careful not to overshoot, of course, his grid position of 3rd place. Andika Rama already there, though, in pole position, alongside Takuya Takahashi. Gerard Policarpio, the last car to come into position. Akshay Gupta, well placed there in 4th position. And Nathias Sirigaya is also there as well. And 10 laps then of racing about to get underway for the 2015 Asian part of the Nissan GT Academy here on the Silverstone International Circuit. So revs will be starting to rise now. Who's going to get the best of the starts? We know that their pace is good from the guy in 3rd position and right behind him, and it is a good start actually from Andika Rama. Not half bad for Jose Gerard Policarpio. He got the car well away as well from the line, so they head down towards Farm for the first time of asking, and it looks like Andika Rama has got a good start there. Policarpio feeding into 3rd position, right behind Takuya Takahashi. Akshay Gupta is in 4th, and 5th place Nathias Sirigaya. So no changes from the grid order as far as I can tell. It's very tight, though, indeed, down at Village, as there are 2 overtakes happening almost simultaneously there. And Policarpio is up to 2nd position, I reckon. Akshay Gupta just about fended off Nathias Sirigaya in 5th place. But there is a change there. In the Philippines, have overtaken Japan and move into 2nd place. It is Andika Rama, though, that leads this race on the opening lap of 10. So a good, well-timed overtake there from Jose Gerard Policarpio. It's been drilled in them from the start of today. If you're going to make an overtake, make sure you are fully committed to it. And it looked like that was a good, clean move down at Village Corner for Policarpio. So Takahashi down to 3rd position in the number 7 red car for Japan. So if you took note of the car numbers, they run 1, 5, 7, 6 and 2 right now, and the battle is on, you know, for the lead of the race. So too it is for fourth position as well, because Akshay Gupta under pressure there from Nathayas Sirigaya, but the gap has come considerably down after this first lap to Andika Rama, who leads the race after just one lap, but only by 0.378 of a second over Jose Gerard Policarpio. For my money, is the man on the move here. Takuya Takakashi can't really live with the pace of the number 5 car, the yellow machine. Down to Village and the link for the second time then of 10. And waiting for the cars to feed out of Chapel Corner. Starting to open up a gap now is the third place car of Takuya Takahashi from Japan. So Akshay Gupta, though showing good pace in qualifying not too long ago, about an hour or so ago, he can't really match the pace of the Japanese driver, at least in the early stages of this race. They're working their way now through Stowe Corner, world famous part of the course, of course, at the end of the Hanger Straight, down through the Vale, and then they get to the left and right flick at Club Corner, which come very quickly indeed. There is a shortcut there, which we hope none of the drivers will take. They're about to come into my sight proper now, and it is still Andika Rama that leads from Jose Gerard Policarpio. Third position is Takuya Takahashi. Fourth place, Akshay Gupta for India in the number 6 orange car, and Nathaya Sirigaya still in 5th position. Now, what happened on the last lap? Well, it was of the flyers, and of course we can now start to read into these lap times. The first one was from a standing start. This second one, the best car out there was the race leader. So Andika Rama has reacted to the quicker pace of Policarpio behind him, and he's opened the gap up now to 6.5 tenths. 1.6 seconds further back is the Japanese car driven by Takuya Takahashi. Akshay Gupta in 4th place is 2.7 seconds behind, and 5 seconds behind the race leader. And then Nathaya Sirigaya just a second off Akshay Gupta. So the good news is everyone has someone to race with and get involved with and kind of monitor their progress. So down at Stowe come the front runners. Andika Rama still not needing to stick his elbows out too much, although the pressure's on, because Jose Gerard Policarpio is just taking this watching brief, I'd say, allowing the race to develop, but staying in touch with the race leader. They're going to come through Club for the third time now and back over the line. It'll be interesting to see whether that gap's come down. I reckon it probably has. 0.6 of a second. No, it's gone up, so it shows how much I know. 8 tenths of a second now between Indonesia and Philippines. Third position for Takuya Takahashi. So Indonesia, Philippines, Japan, India are 4th, Thailand are 5th, and another quickest lap that time around for Andika Rama with a 1:18.023. Are we going to see a lap time down in the 1:17s? He only needs to improve by 24 thousandths of a second to break that marker of 1:18. So nose to tail there, I noticed, as they two cars headed through the link, and someone's gone a bit wide. I think that's at the back of the field. Yes, it is. So Akshay Gupta just pushing a bit too hard as they reach Chapel on this 4th lap, and that allows Nathaya Sirigaya to move his car up the inside. It was kind of gifted to him, but he was there to pressurise Akshay Gupta into a mistake. So lap 4, and positions 4th and 5th change around. At the head of the order, though, it is still Rama ahead of Policarpio. Takuya Takakashi not able to get quite close enough to involve himself in this leading duo, though. So can Takahashi start to get his head down and maybe use a double toe from Andika Rama and Policarpio? And that gap has definitely come down now from 8 tenths of a second. It's down to 0.458. What was the lap time like from Takahashi, who's trying to get involved in this battle, but he's still 2.5 seconds away from it? He's in 3rd, a 1:18.5. Down at Farm Corner, has somebody come a cropper? No, they're all just about still on the circuit. There's that change, as I mentioned, though, for 4th position. That happened down at Chapel Corner. Nathaya Sirigaya getting ahead of Akshay Gupta. Leaders working their way through the link for the 5th time. So the end of this will be halfway through, and they feed themselves out onto a very quick part of the circuit, Hanger Straight. And the grid now in 2 definite groups, I'd say, 1st, 2nd and 3rd, The winner could come from any of those 3 cars. Then there's this gap, which is up to 5 seconds, back to new 4th place man, Nathaya Sirigaya. Akshay Gupta in 5th position. I reckon Sirigaya's maybe got a bit more pace than he's showing in this race. There's a car gone wide at Stowe. Now, is that the race leader, or was that the second 2 coming through? I think that maybe was Takahashi with the moment. And that happened at the end of the Hangar Straight. They're going to feed their way now out of Club Corner round this arcing right. And there is a lead change because Policarpio is now ahead of the former leader Andika Rama. So Philippines lead it from Indonesia in second. Big gap back to a damaged number 6 car of Akshay Gupta. He's lost the front right headlight after clouting Sirigaya, it looks like. So that was Takahashi who went straight on at the end of Hangar Straight with a moment at Stowe. Just the car washing out on him very slightly, understeering off. I think he's collected that moment up again and is still running, although we're yet to see him at the end of lap 5. So all change. Philippines lead it from Indonesia, Thailand up to 3rd, India running 4th, and Japan yet to finish his 5th lap, Takuya Takahashi. Well, there goes my theory that the winner was going to come from one of the top 3. It's not going to come from Takahashi now. And the good news for Andika Rama is that although he's ceded the lead to Jose Gerard Policarpio, he's still very much in touch. 6/10, maybe 7/10 of a second. Here is a very slow Takahashi arriving back in pit lane, and it looks like that car is out of the race, certainly out of contention, as the leaders work their way back from Stowe through the Vale and into Club Corner. And the gap has fluctuated really between 4/10 and 8/10 of a second. Last time around it was 6/10, but Philippines leading Indonesia for the first time in the race. It's still the yellow car ahead of the green, by the way. And the gap is 6/10 again with a new fastest lap from Indonesia. So Andika Rama turning the screw a little bit here. He does a 1:18. No, sorry, beg pardon, get my screen mixed up there. That lap was quicker by Indonesia, but it wasn't a new fastest lap. It was 1:18.311. Compare that to the Philippines, a 1:18.379. So 0.06 of a second quicker. These are small margins, and he's kind of stabilised that gap between Jose Gerard Policarpio and Andika Rama. Through in 3rd position. New 3rd place actually is Akshay Gupta. So Gupta gaining that spot on Sirigaya. And it's a shame actually that battle isn't for the lead of the race, because it's one of the best in the race. For 3rd position, was for 4th, is now for 3rd after Japan's retirement. So it started with 5, down to 4 cars, and they are the leaders now at Stowe, working their way through this right-hander, which opens out very gently to then the drop through the Vale, and you can feel that through your backside. Braking for this left and right-hander at Club Corner, and the sharpness of Club Corner gets less and less as they feed their way out onto the start and finish line. It's still Policarpio, but he cannot shake the attentions of Andika Rama. The Philippines ahead of Indonesia, then a big gap back to the 3rd place battle, but still very interesting this, because although the car of Akshay Gupta is a bit lighter now, missing 1 or 2 body panels after it looks like some contact with Nathaya Sirigaya, Gupta is able to stretch his legs a bit now over the 4th place Sirigaya for Thailand. 1 second is the gap from 3rd to 4th, but 0.649 of a second between Philippines and Indonesia. Still staying very constant is that gap from 1st to 2nd. The leaders are just heading down Hangar Straight now for the 8th time. So this race getting pretty old now. Only a 10-lap affair, remember, and we are 7.5 into it. So waiting for the cars now to appear back at Stowe. It is still the yellow car ahead of the green. So Policarpio for the Philippines, leading Andika Rama in 2nd position. Then this large gap back of nearly 10 seconds to the 3rd place fight, which is headed by Gupta. But Sirigaya may still have a say in who finishes 3rd, because he is circulating just over a second behind, waiting for the leaders to appear at the end then of lap 8. And are we going to see any improvement in lap times, I wonder? The fastest lap is still in the hands of 2nd place man Andika Rama. Over the line then at the end of 8 laps. The gap is up to a second now. That was a half-decent time from the Philippines driver Policarpio. Nothing special, but it was much, much better than Rama, because he's actually lapped that time around half a second quicker. So as I say, the gap's up to a second now between Policarpio and Rama. 3rd position is still Akshay Gupta, who started 4th. And in fourth, who started fifth, is Nathayus Sirigeya. Sadly for you Japanese fans watching on Nismo TV, Takuya Takahashi, your man from Japan, is no longer in the race. Where are the leaders working their way down Hanger Straight for the 9th time then? We have been in this race for about 11 minutes and they head through this relatively, well, sort of medium speed right-hander at Stowe Corner, which then provides the run through the Vale towards this hard braking area and an overtaking opportunity, but not for Andika Rama this time around, because he's still about a second off the back of Jose Gerard Policarpio, who is managing this race very well indeed, I'd say. He's, of course, constantly got the white and green car of Andika Rama in the mirrors, and that in itself is pressure. But Jose Gerard Policarpio just concentrating on his own race and ensuring that he doesn't make a mistake. He is getting slower, though, interestingly enough, but so is Rama. That was a 1:18.9 from Policarpio, but a tenth of a second slower was Andika Rama. So again, he's lost a bit of ground. 1.2 seconds now, the gap between first and second. A full 10.7 seconds adrift of the leading duo is third placed Akshay Gupta for India, and the Thailand driver Nathayus Sirigeya is still in fourth position. That was Sirigeya's best lap of the race, a 1:18.983. This is the final lap though, so if a move is to be made, then it needs to be now. Are they side by side, the race leaders, at the end of the Hanger Straight? Yes, they are. So Policarpio starting to turn off the style here. They're working their way through Stowe Corner. It's still the yellow car just ahead of the green, but Andika Rama from nowhere, bearing in mind he was 1.2 seconds adrift, he's right on the boot lid now of Policarpio. So Policarpio, I would guess, has made a mistake somewhere, and Jose Gerard Policarpio having to defend heavily into Club Corner. Is Policarpio going to go a bit wide here? This could be a move through the final corner for Andika Rama. They are absolutely nose to tail here, but across the line by about a car's length, it is going to be Jose Gerard Policarpio, despite a slight error which brought the gap from 1.2 seconds down to just 0.3 of a second at the end of that race. And in fact, a really good fight for third position as well, with Akshay Gupta just about fending off Nathayus Sirigeya for third position. That was 0.219 of a second's difference. It was 0.288 of a second difference between the first and second place finishers. So they came very much separated by almost 11 seconds in the end. But first and second, really good fight. Third and fourth, a really good fight. Just a shame for Takuya Takahashi, who retired about halfway through and sadly wasn't involved. He, by the looks of things, didn't rejoin. No, remains in the pits. But a massive congratulations to Jose Gerard Policarpio there, who showed a great bit of racecraft for my money, but also a level head when it really mattered. He pushed the car a bit too hard, perhaps down at Village Corner, overshot that corner, and that delayed him through the link, and that meant that for the final half lap of that 10-lap affair, Andika Rama was right on his tail and pressurising as much as he could. So full marks to Indonesia for staying in it and being able to mount a challenge at the death, but also more marks, I would say, for Jose Gerard Policarpio for standing up to that pressure and staying on top. So the checkered flag has been displayed. The cars just slowing down now, working their way through Stowe Corner to, I'm sure, much congratulations from all of the driver coaches, the tutors, but particularly those guys looking after Jose Gerard Policarpio, who started from, I think I said third position. Yes, third place, having been the first non-finisher, effectively, at Northampton International Raceway last night. Remember, 5 Nissan Micras, which, fair to say, were fairly late on in their life. Well, they came back a crumpled mess, much of them. 5 started, only 2 finished. And Jose Gerard Policarpio wasn't a finisher, but he was the car to have completed the most laps of the non-finishers. So that's the reason why he started third. Akshay Gupta completed slightly fewer laps, and Nathayus Sirigeya even fewer still. But Andika Rama, who started from pole, lost out on that race by about 2 car lengths and no more. 0.3 of a second. In fact, it was 0.288 of a second. And Jose Gerard Policarpio showed some pace, certainly in the pseudo qualifying session about an hour or so ago. So we shouldn't be surprised at his rise through the order from third position to eventually win that race. But he certainly had to work for it. And I'm sure the biggest grin of all 5 gentlemen will be on Jose Jose Gerard Policarpio's face. Disappointment for Andika Rama, but he will have certainly earned himself a lot of plaudits for that performance, and of course how he won last night's brutal affair around the quarter mile at Brayfield. Takuya Takahashi, sadly a non-finish for him. And then the interesting question about Akshay Gupta and Matthias Sirigaya, because of course it was stated in the driver's briefing that any contact that was made during the 10 laps, if it was your fault, then you would be out of Nissan GT Academy entirely. So it was put to them that they could win. They couldn't win Nissan GT Academy over the 10 laps, but they could certainly lose it. And I just wonder whether, having not really seen that incident close enough, where the blame lay there. I mean, it could have been a racing incident between Akshay Gupta and Matthias Sirigaya, but if there was a definite offender, then they could be out on the spot, of course. So, Jose Gerard Policarpio, you could argue in the box seat, will it be yellow again? Because Matthew Simmons, the Australian, last Wednesday was driving the yellow number 5 car. He got through, eventually, after much deliberation. The orange car won the race. As I say, Dagley driving that 8 days ago managed to get through from the international part of this competition. Hussein Dagley, but of course he didn't win. It was the Matthew Simmons car that got through eventually, and he finished outside of the top 2. Are we going to get a winner of the Asian competition outside of the top 2? Or will it be either Rama or Policarpio? I would be surprised if it's not Jose Gerard Policarpio for the Philippines or Andika Rama for Indonesia. They, for me, were the ones that really shone. They kept themselves out of trouble, but were able to race cleanly as well. And Policarpio didn't hurry, didn't rush at trying to get the race lead. He just waited for it to come to him. He too, of course, had pressure from Takuya Takahashi. But then Takuya Takahashi kind of involved in his own moment, throwing the car off halfway around the lap. And that was at the end of Hanger Straight, wasn't it, at Stowe Corner. And then sadly wasn't able to recover and had to retire the car there and then. But interesting stuff. Where are your votes, I wonder, on NISMO TV? Could it be with Jose Gerard Policarpio? He's the obvious choice, but Andika Rama deserves, as I say, a lot of praise with how he attacked that race with a level head and then pushed when it was necessary on that final lap to really put Policarpio under pressure and forced a mistake from him as well. On another day, that could well have been his race, Andika Rama, starting from pole, so yes, he had the advantage there, but nevertheless showed good pace for 9 laps really. I'd like to see a replay of just exactly how Jose Gerard Policarpio managed to take the lead, because I have to say I don't think I was looking at quite the right screen at that moment, but Policarpio able to force Rama into a mistake, and very nearly that favour was repaid at the end of the event. But another great tussle, if we do so ourselves, in the Nissan GT Academy and PlayStation 3, because it provided a wonderful competition which kept us guessing to the very end really, and who's to say where these drivers will go on to next and whether we've unearthed real talent, only time will tell. But certainly it was a very level playing field, and that's kind of what a lot of people predicted. There were 1 or 2 steady improvers through the week, 1 or 2 that started well and then faded a little bit, and then there were the traditional kind of consistent chaps like Akshay Gupta, who set his mark fairly high at the start of the week but then didn't really rise above that for the remaining days. Provided a great spectacle, and we hope you enjoyed it here on NISMO TV with myself, Johnny Palmer, hoping to have a chat with Lawrence at some point, but he is clearly a very busy man and has rushed off elsewhere. So nearing the end of our broadcast, any further questions you have, then by all means the forum is there to get involved. Average laps is a great question, and they will be retrievable no doubt from TSL's website, tsl-timing.com, and you'll be able to work out, well, all the individual lap times are actually listed there, and Rabin I think is just going to put the link up for you to investigate further. But yes, that will be something that the driver tutors and advisors will take into account as well, not just the race result on paper, but how the drivers got there through the various stages, and were they able to put consistent lap times in. One thing is for certain, the race pace got slower, because the fastest laps I think were set laps 2 or 3. I seem to remember Indonesia's time, Andika Rama's time of 1:18.023, which eventually became the fastest lap. That was set very early on in the race, and everybody else started to just slow a touch, clearly concentrating on getting the car to the finish, but the lap times dropped from low in the 1:18s to late 1:18s to 1:19s, and we even saw 1:21s. In fact, it was a 1:21 from the race leader and the race winner eventually. That was because of Jose Gerard Policarpio's moment. And that, of course, could count against him when the final judgment comes along. That's a bit later on today, as I understand it. Matthew Simmons was announced at, about 6 or 7 p.m. last Wednesday. And we now go into a fairly lengthy deliberation process where all of the tutors will get together. All of the driver trainers, the advisors, will get together and work out exactly who is to win the Asian element of the Nissan GT Academy. Okay, so that just about draws to a close our broadcast here on Nismo TV. We've been live from Silverstone Circuit in the international configuration of the Silverstone Circuit for the last hour and a half or so. I hope you've enjoyed our broadcast. Do we know who's going to win? Well, stay tuned, of course, to the Nismo TV forum for the very latest on who is to be announced as the winning Asian driver. But a fascinating event. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and we wish you well for the rest of the day, wherever you're watching and viewing around the world. Goodbye from me, Johnny Palmer.